in you as a deep thirst for the water, Lord. So my soul longs after you. My soul thirsts for the living God. Yes, my soul longs after you, and I pour out my soul deep within me, deep within me. I pour out my soul, draw me deeper, Lord, deeper, Lord, in you. Draw me deeper, Lord, deeper, Lord, in you. And I pour out my soul deep within me, deep within me. I pour out my soul. Draw me deeper, Lord, deeper, Lord, in you. Draw me deeper, Lord, deeper, Lord, in you. Let's all together stand. At this time, we'd like to dismiss to the nursery. This is the season for new anointing. This is the season for fresh outpouring. That the sons and daughters of the King of Glory may arise and shine. That the sons and daughters of the King of Glory may arise and shine as we declare, this is the day, this is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, I will rejoice, I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day, this is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. In the beginning God created, and for his pleasure all creation sing. Every son and daughter of the King of Glory now rise and shine. Every son and daughter of the King of Glory now rise and shine as we declare, this is the day, this is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, I will rejoice, I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day, this is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day, this is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. And the church said, Amen. Maybe seated.
All right, well, tomorrow is New Year's Day, and so what that means is that a lot of people are making New Year's resolutions. So what I want you to do for the next couple of minutes is I want you to turn to the person or persons around you, and I want you to tell them what your New Year's resolutions are. Now, the reason I want you to do this is because, number one, hearing what you plan to do may inspire them, right, to fix up their screwed up lives. Or, number two, telling them what you're going to do may hold you accountable to do it. All right, so do you understand? Let's take a few minutes. Tell the people around you, what are your New Year's resolutions? All right, are we willing to share any of these? Are you pointed, Pat? All right, what's your New Year's resolution, Pat?
More ice cream.
Eat more ice cream. Now, see, that's a resolution I get on board with, right? I don't have to have a particular kind. Just ice cream, yeah? Somebody else, what's your New Year's resolution? What? Freddie, what's your New Year's resolution?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He just said that he wants to have God allow him to be more aware of people and their struggles.
Okay. Freddie wants God to help him be more aware of people and their struggles. Deeper awareness of the needs around me, right? And Gary should resolve not to put people on the spot in the new year, right? Same for Ben. All right, somebody else, what's your New Year's resolution? See, you're afraid to share because you're afraid the preacher's going to hold you to it all year long, right? He's going to keep preaching sermons about that until I get it right. Yeah, Elsie. To just go with the flow. You know, I really ought to resolve that because very often the times when I'm most upset are when my expectations haven't been met, you know, and then that just ruins the rest of my day. So I get that. That's a good one. Let me put it to you like this. How many of you have made, you don't have to tell us what they are, but how many of you have made spiritual resolutions for the new year? Okay, that's a good number. My boys don't know this yet, but my wife and I have resolved for them that we're going to read the Bible through this year. I like those little Bible project videos. Some of you have seen those online, and we're going to tailor our Bible reading to go along with those videos. And it's not just so that we can get to the end of the year and say, hey, look what we've done. We've read the Bible through in a year. No, we understand that the reading of the Bible is instrumental to our transformation as human beings. We understand that that's where our transformation begins. And people who make spiritual resolutions, they want to be transformed. They do. They want to be more faithful people. They want to be more Christ-like people. And so what I want to do for you this morning, if you've made spiritual resolutions that could lead to revolution, I want to encourage you today to keep them. I want to inspire you to keep them. I want you to know that you can do it. I want you to know if Daniel can do it, you can do it. And in fact, I want you to know if you don't have any spiritual New Year's resolutions, Daniel has some that you can borrow. I want to take a break from Revelation. For the last couple of weeks, we have been deep in Revelation. We've been hard in Revelation. And I want to take a little break from that this morning to encourage you and inspire you and give you some ideas about things that you could do, that I could do in this new year to be transformed spiritually. And I want to take these lessons from the Old Testament prophet Daniel. Just turn to chapter 1 with me. I'm going to spend a little bit more time in chapter 1, but we're going to deal with the first 6 chapters all together. I've always liked Daniel because of the stories. That's all we've ever really known about it, the stories of the first 6 chapters. I'm becoming more and more excited about Daniel as we get into Revelation, because so much of Daniel 7 to 12 is referenced in Revelation, and so you kind of got to know the two of those. But nobody sits back with warm, fuzzy thoughts about Daniel 7 through 12. It's Daniel 1 through 6. It's those stories about Daniel living in exile that really resonate with us. Here's the way the book begins. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The first thing I need you to know about studying Daniel is that Daniel's story is a story told in exile. Jehoiakim comes to power in about 609. He's taken off into exile in 606. Now, I need you to remember that number. It's not that there's going to be a test, but there's a really important point that I'm going to make here in just a minute about that number. Daniel goes into exile in about 606 BC. And here's what exile is. In the ancient world, the powers that be thought if one power defeated another power, it was one god defeating another god. That, of course, is not what has happened here. If you go on and read verse 2, you find out that Nebuchadnezzar comes in and he raids the temple and he carts off all of the gold and silver and the utensils in the temple. He raids God's temple. And so it might have been tempting for people to believe that the Babylonian gods had been triumphant over the Israelite gods, but that's not what's happened. You know that this was God's doing. That the people of Israel and Judah had broken God's covenant repeatedly. And so in 722, the Assyrians came in and wiped out the northern kingdom of Israel. And now in 586, starts in 606, but in 586, the Babylonians come in and wipe out the southern kingdom of Judah. So this is all God's doing. It's all under God's control. It might be helpful for you to remember as you live out your exile here that whatever mess you go through is still under God's control. It's a very disciplining thing. It's a thing maybe to get your attention. If you look back at 2017 and you think, man, how bad was that? It could actually serve for your deliverance. So Daniel goes into exile, and what that means in exile is that he's living in a foreign country among pagan people, among nobody who shares his morals, his values, his commitments. Let's look at the text again. Verse 3, the king commanded Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish and of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge and understanding and learning and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. So here's what happens. The exile occurs in waves, 606, 597, and 586. This is the first wave. Babylon has just come into power in Israel, in Judah. So the first thing they do is they take the cream of the crop and they take them to Babylon to train them for the bureaucracy. That's what they're doing. They want to train them in the language and the literature of the Babylonians so that they can help administer this Babylonian district. And so Daniel is taken off into exile, and he's he's re-educated. We hear some things about that in our culture too. If we have the wrong beliefs, if we practice the wrong things, there's some in our culture that think we need to be re-educated. Well, that's what's happening to Daniel. Everything that defines his existence is under assault. His church is under assault. His beliefs are under assault. His name is going to be changed. Keep reading with me. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. And they were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah, and the chief of the eunuchs gave them new names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. Everything about them was under assault, from the food that they ate to the names that they wore. All of these 4 Hebrew young guys have names that reflect and honor the glory of Yahweh. Well, now they're taken off into Babylonian captivity, and they're given names that honor the Babylonian gods. Everything is under assault. That's what life is like living in exile. Everything that you are, everything that you think, everything you believe, everything that you do is under pressure from the surrounding culture. You don't fit in. And in their terms, in order for you to fit in, you're going to have to be re-educated. But what does Daniel do? It's this first incident in chapter 1 that gives us real insight into Daniel's resolve. Look at verse 8. I want to show you what he does in exile. Verse 8 says it very clearly. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. He asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. Now, if you keep on reading the story, you find out that the chief eunuch doesn't know what to make of this, and he's awfully concerned about it. The king has given him orders to fatten these guys up, lean them up, make them, buff and sexy. And Daniel says, I think I'll be a vegetarian. Okay? Every vegetarian friend I've ever had looks like they're on the point of death. But that's okay. So he's upset about this. He doesn't know, if you don't turn out, buff like you're supposed to, the king's going to have my head. And Daniel says, just go with me. Don't make me defile myself. The first thing here that we learn about Daniel is that he will not compromise his convictions even in exile. He is not going to give up what he knows to be the truth just to appease the culture around him. And he takes a stand even though he's threatened by it, even though those around him are threatened by it. And I want you to notice how God responds here, verse 9. God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. Furthermore, down in verse 15, at the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. Daniel resolved he would not compromise his convictions even in the exile. And Miss Elsie, I know your resolution was to go with the flow. Daniel decided not to. Sometimes it's good to. In Daniel's case, it wasn't good to. In Daniel's case, it would have been safer to give up, to get in, to get along. But Daniel was committed to God, and God was committed to Daniel. Look down at verse 17. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom. Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams, which will come in handy in the rest of the book. At the end of the time when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in to appear before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and among all of them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Daniel refused to compromise his convictions. We are living in exile. We're living in a world that's not our home, and we are constantly under pressure to compromise our convictions, to do politics, to do business, to get along. I'm not saying we have to be a jerk about things, because that's not right either. But perhaps we ought to resolve in the new year to stop compromising. You know, that's what we've been learning in the book of Revelation. Those 7 letters written to those 7 churches, the number one issue in those letters is stop compromising with your pagan culture just to do business. Now hear me, I'm not saying be a jerk about it. Don't be obnoxious about it. If you're going to be persecuted, make sure it's for righteousness' sake and not obnoxiousness' sake. But this is just the first incident in 6 chapters where Daniel continues to stand up for what is right, and Daniel is honored by God for doing it. It happens at least once a chapter for the first 6 chapters. This is a manual. Daniel is a manual about how to live in exile. And it starts with, don't forget where you're from by compromising your convictions. Okay, now, I want to show you that date one more time. 606 is when Daniel goes into exile. And this last line, do you see verse, 21? Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. Okay. How long does the exile for Judah last? 70 years, right? There are a couple of different ways you can do the math, either from 606 to 536 or from 586 to 516. Any way you cut it, it's 70 years. Which means that Daniel spends the great majority of his life in exile. But notice what chapter 1 says. Chapter 1 says he was a youth. Scholars debate what that means. It could very well mean, let's just say for the sake of argument, that Daniel is 17 when he goes into exile. He's still living in Babylon when Cyrus the Great overtakes the Babylonians in 539 and then sends the exiles home in 536. In other words, if Daniel goes into exile when he's 17, it's 67 years from 606 to when Cyrus takes over. Daniel doesn't face the lion's den for a few years after that. Which means, what's 17 plus 70? 87? Could it be that in chapter 1 of Daniel, he's a mere 17 years old, and in chapter 6, he's in his late 80s to early 90s? Do you see where I'm going with this? Daniel's entire life is made useful to God's service. From his teens to his 90s. We've got people in this church at the end of a new year, at the end of an old year, at the beginning of a new year, they think they don't have much service left to provide. It's just not true. We've also got young people in this church here at the end of this old and beginning of the new. They think, well, I'm too young to provide any service. And it's just not true. Daniel's life is a testimony of faithful service from beginning to end. And let me tell you, young people, he didn't wake up one day at 17 and just say, hey, I think I'll not compromise my convictions today. Daniel had obviously been taught by his